Strike from the skies. Assault jump now suppresses enemies in addition to damage and knockback. Suppressed enemies get heavy penalties to movement speed and weapon reload. Useful? Useful. But in general, the skill is passable. Assault jump itself is great. Not only does it grant mobility, but also deals a ton of damage to infantry units. Aegis of Fury. Short-term invulnerability after landing. Must have. Actually yes. Fall down, fight, then either add crowd control from other units or retreat, wait for the jump cooldown and repeat. Assaults are a strong squad, but in the early stages, when you don't have good equipment, the main thing is not to overcommit them in combat and maximize the advantage of their jump. Blessing of Zeal. Restores health with every blow. Not a bad feat, much better than Commander's Analog, but not essential and in general optional. It starts to work well in the late game when you have good equipment with damage resistance. In the early stage you're either invulnerable, or the enemy is crowd controlled, or squad mates can simply get one shot. Vampirism doesn't help in either of those three cases. Bolter Aptitude allows to use bolters. Quite a boring ability, as it doesn't give any bonuses besides that. The bolter itself is quite effective in the first half of the campaign, and considering that at this stage assaults are quite fragile, it even sometimes performs better than melee, for example in boss fights. Otherwise the strategy remains the same: fall down, shoot, retreat. Ranged Aptitude, access to Plasma and Flamer. Overall the skill is so-so. Flamer is just no, while Plasma... Let's start with pros. Plasma is more effective against heavy infantry and at the same time does at least some damage to vehicles. On the downsides, Plasma has a generally lower DPS than Bolter. So you will use it either if you lack anti-armor damage or if you are lucky enough to find a really good item. Range Specialist. Similar to the skill of Tarkus and Commander, it allows you to shoot Plasma and Flamer on the move. But in addition to this, it gives a chance to stun with any ranged weapon. By the way, the last property was not there originally, it was added with patches, and it is the one that is interesting here. I'll be honest, don't count on this ability to keep your enemies stunned forever. It works regularly, but not too often. Overall, it's more like a fun ability, all through it's not bad. The main drawback is that you already have reliable AoE stuns on demand, from Cyrus, Davian Tool and the Universal Blind Grenade, which rather overshadow the usefulness of random stuns. On the plus side, the stun applied to any ranged weapons, including bolt and plasma pistols. You might be surprised to find out how often assaults actually use pistols. Merciless Strike. Area attack. Due to the explosive damage type, it even penetrates vehicles and buildings. All through, of course, they will require a lot more than one hit. It's just a good ability. It does enough damage to one-shot Elder Catapults and is generally useful for knocking down heavy close combat hitters like Ravenous and Nobs. Despite all this, you shouldn't rush it. Invulnerability is just more useful, plus you won't have enough energy for all at once. Power Weapon Aptitude. Access to power swords, axes and fists. Well, as I already said, there are very few good power swords in the campaign, and they generally have less DPS than chainswords. Axes have even less DPS, even in the expansion, but quite often they come with additional armor, which is not bad. Fist is interesting because of its ability to damage and stun vehicles, but the DPS is also low. Besides, one fist is not enough for stun lock. In general, Commander Thunderhammer is much better, also you can use pistols with a fist. And if you are lucky, you can find one of a few really good pistols with a lot of armor or melee damage resistance. So the skill in the vanilla campaign is average, and you will rather rely on Melter Bombs and Merciless Strike to deal with vehicles. All through, they are more of an addition to something more substantial. Terminator Honors. So yeah, you are a Terminator now. Let's start with hammers. This is the only weapon that Tadeusz can use, unfortunately no storm bolters for him. The hammer itself is an equivalent of a fist, that is, it stuns vehicles and penetrates all kinds of targets. Often hammers come with extra armor and ranged resistance, which is good. On the downsides, chainsaws have more DPS and teleportation, all through instant, doesn't deal damage like jump. Actually, both variants, power armor and terminators, play well in the campaign, and it's more a matter of a taste. Or you take terminators if you lack anti-armor damage. Chapter's Fury. The ability is charged by taking damage. When activated for a short time, other abilities do not cost energy and have no cooldown. Note that if other abilities were already on cooldown, they will not be reset, so keep that in mind. I honestly don't like this ability. First of all, the cooldown is irregular. Secondly, abilities still have the animation, so in reality you can only use a few additional casts during the duration effect. And lastly, it's not that you want to spam your abilities in the first place. Trying to take down a tank with just strikes? Well, good luck. On the bright side, you can use 2 or 3 jumps in a row, which will give you a decent invulnerable turn. Unfortunately, if you go for terminators, you simply won't have any alternatives to this ability. Improved loadout. Must have, but don't rush it. Laraman's Blessing. Equivalent of Tarkus Feat, but with a longer invulnerable duration. Unfortunately, it's even more useless, as Tarkus at least has Taunt, while left alone Tadeusz cannot do much. The first thing you should do in any type of build is to take Aegis of Fury for invulnerability. Next, if your choice is a melee Terminator build, take Merciless Strike, Improved Loadout and Blessing of Zeal. Then just pump up the strength. For Raptor build, Range Specialist, Merciless Strike, Improved Loadout and Blessing of Zeal. The rest goes into the melee branch. About this build, the first half of the campaign we play as ranged using Bolter or Plasma, but when the Terminator armor becomes available, Tarkus will take Stone Bolter and the difference in ranged DPS will become huge. At that point we again take Chain Sword, and it's the usual melee build in power armor, but instead of the rather useless Power Sword and Chapter's Fury we get random stun shots with pistol. Alternatively, if you want to play as melee right away, just change the order. First Merciless Strike, Improved Loadout and Blessing of Zeal, then Range Specialist, and the rest goes into strength.